Good morning. Very pleasant good morning, everyone. I'd like to ask if you could please rise and join me in a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, and please be seated. Good morning.
Good morning.
How is everyone this morning?
Awake.
Awake is a great place to start a day, absolutely. Good morning. My name is Sean Moore, President of the Midstate Chamber of Commerce. Pleased to welcome you all here to the 4 Points by Sheraton here in Meriden. We are running a program we affectionately call the Breakfast Club Celebrates. We love celebrating things here. And we'd like to also welcome our co-presenters from the Hubcap Wallingford and the Cheshire Chamber of Commerce. Let's give them a hand as well. In addition, we'd like to recognize our sponsors. We have two platinum sponsors this morning, AT&T. Good luck on the I-7 launch today. Ooh, absolutely. And our friends from Flu Black by Protein Sciences. Thank you, folks. Gold sponsor this morning, our friends from TD Bank. Thank you kindly. And we have two bronze sponsors, Alternative Therapy, a professional counseling service, and the Silver City Sports Bar and Grill. Let's give them both a hand, please. We call this Breakfast Club Celebrates because we are celebrating a number of things this morning. This is Subliminal Communications Month. This is All-American Breakfast Month. Hope you had a fabulous breakfast this morning. We kick off National Shameless Self-Promotion Month. Isn't this just like a chamber holiday, right? Absolutely. So congratulations that we all get that. And we also are beginning this day, the Hispanic Heritage Month. We end up the month with our annual all-out breakfast here at the 4 Points, so check that out soon. We'd like to begin by introducing our head table. We have the Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Midstate Chamber, Mr. Richard Pendred. Representing Flu Black by Protein Sciences, Ms. Minnow Cox. The Mayor of the City of Meriden, Kevin Scarpati. And the State President for AT&T Connecticut, Mr. John Emra. And you probably can figure out that the last seat is waiting for our speaker, who is approximately 7 minutes away. So we are in waiting. So before we begin, I'd like to have some introductory remarks from someone who actually needs no introduction because she has no problem introducing herself. You know, grabbing your arm. In a moment, she'll probably grab Susan. Susan will grab a tool, and all of a sudden, you'll be protected for an entire season. Amazing. So, without further ado, Minnow Cox.
Thank you, Sean. I must say, Sean has been one of those first adopters to getting Flu Block, and I commend you for that. So that's really good. So everybody here probably knows Protein Sciences. We're based here in Meriden. We have been receiving a lot of support from the Chamber. So I want to thank Sean and everyone in this chamber for that. For those of you who haven't heard about Flu Block is a new revolutionary influenza vaccine. It was approved by the FDA now more than 3 years ago. It's approved for everyone 18 years and older. And it's different from all the other vaccines in that it matches the viruses that are circulating in nature and therefore provides much better protection, as we have shown in a very large study of about 10,000 people of 50 years and older. We showed that you were 45% less likely to get the flu when you had received Flu Block. So it's really worth it because many of you may not be aware of the fact that flu is really a killer. Every year, 30,000 people in the United States alone die as a result of the consequences of the flu. And I just don't grab other people's arms. Susan will also grab my arm, and I will get vaccinated, not because I'm afraid of getting the flu, but I am afraid of giving it to you. 20% of us during the flu season will walk around and will give the flu to people that are way more vulnerable, and that's really the main reason why we need to get a flu shot. So Susan, our Director of Clinical Services, get up, Susan, so that everybody sees who you are, is actually here with the Hunter bus parked right in front of this building, and she will be providing flu shots or flu block shots later. And I'll be sure that you won't regret it after you receive the vaccine. So thank you all for your support.
Thank you much. So to continue with some introductions, we have one of our co-presenters from the Cheshire Chamber of Commerce. We have Sheldon Dilda, President, and Derek Gromko, Board Chair. Thank you, folks. From the community of Wallingford, we have from Hubcap, Joe Mara and Liz Landau from Wallingford Center, Inc. And in the Midstate Chamber, we have some of our Board of Director members. We have David Simons, ProShred Security, Amisha Taylor, TD Bank, and Attorney Thomas Welsh from Updike, Kellecy, and Spellacy PC. Let's give them all a hand. Other folks you should know who are in the audience, we have the superintendents. We have both Sal Menzo from Wallingford and Mark Benigni from Meriden. Good to see you folks. And as an aside, we do have to repeat that program because that was a pretty good program with the two superintendents. I had a good time with that one. We also have from the Wallingford Board of Ed, Roxanne McKay. Thank you for coming out. We have the Workforce Alliance Executive Director, Mr. Bill Villano. Pleasant good morning. On the City Council side, from Meriden, we have Kathy Batista, Sonia Jelks, and David Lowell. And on the Cheshire Town Council, Patty Flynn Harris. Thank you all for coming, folks. Very quickly down the calendar, we have a number of events happening in the very near future. September 21st, Wednesday, we have a business after hours at the PNA Park in Wallingford. On Friday, September 23rd, ribbon cutting at the Meriden Community Pharmacy. A regional candidate debate happening on September 26th, which is a very, very busy night. We're having our debate with the 13th and 16th senatorial districts, as well as the 83rd, 85th, 90th, and the 103rd Assembly District. There's also this thing happening about 9 o'clock that night. There's something in Washington, this presidential thing. So you will be out by 8 so you can get home and watch that show. If you're interested, our friends from Old Brick Stainless Steel are doing an amazing event down at Zandri Stillwood Inn to raise funds for the Fred Old Brick Award. So please think about convening down there. It's a very, very great fundraiser. Additionally, we have the Silver City Wine Fest and Brew Fest on the 29th and 30th down at the Meriden Green. Additionally, October 4th, has anyone heard of the Working Cities Challenge? Got one? Okay. So if you don't know what it is, stop by the Meriden Green. On the 4th, our governor will be there to kind of roll out that program. It's a very exciting new program for cities, so check that out. We have the business after hours on October 12th. October 14th, again, we'll be back here for our Ola breakfast, and on the 27th of October, another business after hours at the brand new renovated Fairfield Inn in Wallingford. So there is a whole lot coming on in the very, very near future, so please come out often. So I'm very, very pleased to be here this morning, and this is actually the third time we've seen the governor this week. He was here last Friday for our grand opening of the Meriden Green. I was up in Hartford for a Chambers for Energy and Innovation program, and he's with us today. So very pleased at this point to call up the state president of AT&T Connecticut, John's been in that position since 2013. He leads the AT&T Legislative, Regulatory, and Community Affairs Services for the state of Connecticut. He works very, very closely with chambers and other community leaders and business leaders around our state to really, so we can understand the resources AT&T has within our community. So I'm very pleased to call John here to introduce our governor.
Thank you. Good morning. I got a hint from the governor who I'm going to introduce that I should be quick and brief, so I will do that. Let me just say I could stand up here and give a very long list of accomplishments that he has had as governor over the last 6 years. And when I thought about what I was going to say this morning, I'm like, how does one introduce a governor who's been our governor for 6 years? But what always reminds what I think of when I think about Governor Malloy is not his long list of accomplishments, but frankly, what he's done to lead this state under some very trying times and under some very important and major crises that we've faced as a state. One of the unfortunate jobs I've had over the years is to sit in the Emergency Operations Center at the State Armory with the governor and his leadership team when we've had 2 hurricanes and a freak snowstorm that I will never get over in remembering. And to watch him in action and to watch him lead that room, it makes you feel good about who's leading this state and that you know that you have a leader, the right kind of leader you need for very trying times. So with that, I will turn it over to Governor Malloy and look forward to hearing from
you. First of all, I apologize for being delayed. I got caught in some traffic. There was a bad accident, unfortunately, and that tied us up. So I do apologize for being delayed. That's the kind of the best introduction is here's Dan, but that keeping it short is good. I know who I am, you know who I am, so it's a-okay doing it that way. It's good to be with you all. I've been here, I think, every year that I've been governor for a session, if not more. So it's good to be back. You do this job long enough, you eventually get reflective. It has been an interesting series of years. If we knew 6 years ago that this recovery from the Great Recession would be unlike any other recovery in the post-World War II period of time, then maybe we would have done some things differently. Except that you don't have a crystal ball that tells you exactly what's going to happen. And no economist in the country predicted that this would be the slowest but longest sustained recovery in that period of time. And then if you look at where we were 6 years ago with a 2-year, $7 billion deficit looking us in the face, with an absence of investment in things like manufacturing or transportation or education, and you now realize where we are, and we've done all of the things, some of which I will touch upon, in a slow growth economy, it really is remarkable. And then if you add information that's now seeping in to our consciousness in the United States, such as in 2015, the largest increase in family incomes since the 1960s, in 2015, or in our own state in 2015, a sizable recovery with respect to the hours worked and the per capita income, and being tied for per capita income and on a family income basis being in the top 5 in the nation. We are actually making progress, although slow progress doesn't necessarily feel like progress, because most of us in this room, and I'm 61, and some of you are my age, and some of you are a little older, and some of you are a little younger, we became used to different types of recoveries and different types of experiences after downturns in the economy. What I think is important about the last 6 years is that we have sustained that investment on a long-term basis, that we took a long-term view about what it would take to make Connecticut competitive with the surrounding states. So for instance, when I became governor, graduation rates had declined in Connecticut 5 years in a row. high school graduation rates had declined 5 years in a row in a state that we knew human capital was not being developed at a rate that we needed to replace our workforce. That's reversed now. 5 years in a row of increased graduation rates. And I would argue that those graduation rates and those graduations are more valuable today than they were even 5 years ago, because we've taken a different approach to what's required to graduate and matriculate through high school, and holding ourselves accountable. And you might say, well, why does he say that? Well, we're number one in reading in the country. We're in the top 5 in mathematics in the country. We have more children living in poverty or urban environments taking advanced placement courses than ever before. These are real investments that we're making. I'll give you another for instance. When I became governor of the state of Connecticut, in a state where we were retiring machinists more rapidly than we were producing them out of our educational system, we've gone from one community college having an advanced manufacturing program to 7 community colleges having that, and some of the private universities having gotten into advanced manufacturing as well. There was a great story on this income thing that I just touched on a minute ago in the paper yesterday, talking about how a young man whose family had come here, and he had come as a child as refugees, had chosen to go to community college and work at the same time to help his family and himself. I don't know whether you saw this. Great story. At first, he decided that he would go to community college full-time and work at night, and then he found that that was a little difficult because he'd only have 3 hours in between and didn't get enough rest and the like. But the interesting part of this story is, going through his education process, his first job was for $10 an hour. His next job was for $15 an hour as he worked part-time as in a manufacturing facility and getting his 2-year degree. He finishes that degree program. He's working at Pratt & Whitney Engines, a company that a lot of folks thought just a few years ago was out of the state or going to be out of the state relatively quickly, making $33 an hour plus a $3 differential. That's what we're doing in Connecticut. In fact, let's go back now to Pratt & Whitney, a company that if you lived in East Hartford, you had convinced yourself that there was no way that company was going to stay in East Hartford or in Middletown. And yet, we have an agreement in place that has them investing hundreds of millions of dollars in Connecticut, building new facilities, modernizing old facilities, with a guarantee that they're going to be making jet engines in our state for a long period of time, supporting a supply chain of more than 75,000 workers in the state of Connecticut. Or let's go to another part of the state. If you lived out in Groton, New London, you were absolutely convinced that Electric Boat was going to move out of the state of Connecticut. And yet they recently announced that they'll be hiring 8,000 more people, or 8,000 people total. Some of it is expansion, some of it is replacement of an older workforce in the state of Connecticut. These are realities that are playing themselves out in Connecticut. I'll give you another for instance. When I became governor of the state of Connecticut, Amazon was not collecting sales tax and had no employees in the state of Connecticut. And I said, we're going to make them pay sales tax. And everyone said, well, that will mean that they won't do any business in Connecticut. Today, they're collecting sales tax, and they have 1,000 employees in the state of Connecticut. Now, I know we live in a state where the glass can never, ever, ever, ever be half full. I understand that. But we beat ourselves up sometimes to our own detriment. There is a great story to be told about this state. After all, Bloomberg ranks us as one of the top 5 innovative states in the nation. Let me say that again. Bloomberg ranks Connecticut as one of the top 5 innovative states in the nation. And if you were to walk down any main street in any town in the state of Connecticut and say that, no one would believe you. That's the reality of what we've done to ourselves. And quite frankly, the jobs at Chambers and Commerce have got to be in part to help change that perception, because we are doing some amazing things that other states are not doing. Now, the truth be told, for a couple of generations, other states were doing amazing things that we weren't doing. So let me go back to where I started with my apology about transportation. The reality is that we've got to make the investments in transportation. If you can't move through our state in a reasonable period of time and understand what it's going to be day to day to day to day, or get to work in a reasonable system of transportation, then we're not going to reach our full potential. I mean, after all, our main competitors is not Mississippi. It's Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. 3 of those states, New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, have made huge investments, or some would say huge investments, which are fabulous. But the reality is that we didn't do that. And that's what we're in the process of doing now. You know, after all, we've called for a very widespread investment in transportation to modernize that system. Just this week, we ordered 60 additional Metro North cars. Let me give you a statistic. The use of that railroad system, the largest commutation system in the nation, is up 12% since 2010, in a time that gasoline has effectively been reduced in cost. It should be the opposite way, and yet we know it's being used. Or some of you people in this room beat me up because I decided that we should press ahead with our investment in Fast Track. We have reached targets on that road system that we weren't expected to reach for 15 years. It's amazing. I mean, 14 years. I don't want to have anyone say I was telling a fib for 14 years. You know, if we press ahead and make the kinds of investments to modernize our transportation system, both for the exchange of human capital and goods, if we continue down the path of making appropriate educational investments, if we continue down the path of a state that understands it's got to be a partner with commerce, I'll give you another for instance. In the 6 years before I became governor, the state of Connecticut invested in, alongside of, made grants to, made loans to a total of 200 companies. As I stand before you, not quite completed 6 years, we've done that over 2,000 times. We saved companies in this state. We've enlarged the footprints. We've brought companies from other states in our nation to Connecticut. We're starting to win some of those fights and see some of that organic growth that we didn't see for a long period of time because we didn't make those investments. And that's particularly true in manufacturing. It's particularly true in innovative commerce, and we should be proud of it. Now, how does that all get distributed, and how do people understand it and buy into it? That's tough. That's tough to have people understand that slow progress is progress nonetheless, and that it is better to make long-term investments than try to keep people happy on the short-term basis. Because after all, that's how Connecticut was run for a long period of time. We'll make you happy today, and you won't notice the slow decline that we're in. Now we're confronting that slow decline and addressing it as well. So I didn't give you the speech that somebody wrote for me. I gave you the speech I thought about while I was tied up in traffic. But all of which is to say, folks, that we are making real progress. I want to be very clear. We are making real progress. We are, even before last year, you know, I'm looking around here, there's a lot of Republicans here. Even before last year, my administration was increasing expenditures at a far slower rate than any of my immediate 2 predecessors. And we were lowering the uninsured rate in our population. And we're making the investments that I talked about. That's who we are, and that's what we are. And so with that, I'll do what I usually do and take a few questions. And then if there are no questions, I'll get out real quick. If there's a few questions, I'll answer them. If I don't like the question, I'll rephrase it to something I like. So. Yep, go ahead.
Is there something that we could have done to prevent GE from leaving the state? Was that something that was just inevitable, or I wonder if you could just address it?
Sure. Well, first of all, GE hasn't left the state. Let's be honest. In all likelihood, they have more employees in our state today than they had in the past. They've just bought a new business in Connecticut? If we're so bad, how come they bought a business that was started in Connecticut? Let me ask you a different way. If I had paid $160 million for 200 jobs, what would you do to me? Yeah.
How many?
160 million for 200 jobs.
It's a little expensive.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Now what we've learned since GE made their announcement and since the Boston Globe FOI'd a bunch of their files is that this was under consideration for 3 years. So let me tell you my story about GE. They should have moved their headquarters to Stamford 20 years ago, 14 years ago, 10 years ago, and they didn't do it. In part, I think, because that's where GE Capital was, and after a certain amount of time, that's where some of their troubles came from, and they just didn't want to do it. And their biggest problem was that they found that they could not attract the younger talent in certain businesses to a suburban campus that they wanted to attract. That's what we've learned. And quite frankly, if they'd gone to New Haven or gone to Stamford, they probably could have done that. But they didn't. Do I wish they had stayed? Absolutely. Do I appreciate all the GE jobs that we have in the state? Yes. Synchrony, spinoff. They had to get rid of it. It was part of the too big to fail. Has already met and exceeded their targets for hiring in the state of Connecticut. I don't think Synchrony would have been allowed to grow the way it's grown if it had remained part of GE. And they're based here. We have other assets that have been sold by GE, remaining in Connecticut and expanding. Again, in the financial services area, where they would not have been allowed to grow if they had remained part of GE. So that's my quick answer to it. We have, but here, this is the great thing about Connecticut. I love it. I love my state. But we're a little hard on ourselves. Do you know that in the last 5 years, a little startup cable company came to Connecticut, serving relatively few houses or homes in the country, is now the third largest cable company in the nation, and it's based in Connecticut and Stamford? Right? But that's beside the fact. Right? So, I mean, I think that you didn't know the Synchrony story, you didn't know other stories. We tend to dwell on that which is most negative about ourselves, and to the exclusion of the really good things that are happening, not on a short-term basis, but on a long-term basis in Connecticut. Sure. Mike?
Thank you, Governor. You were here to do the ribbon cutting for a project that you're...
It only cost me $20 million. It's,
small investment.
yeah.
But you saw in Meriden an opportunity to do really some major structural change with some investment in flood control, DOD, and so forth. Looking forward to the future of mid-sized and smaller communities in Connecticut, what do you think are the keys for them to be successful?
I think the keys for them to be successful are a few things. To learn how to be attractive to young people. I want to say that again. I think what Connecticut needs to do is refocus itself to be attractive to young people. Some of our bigger cities are doing that. Yale's very hot. I mean, Yale. New Haven's very hot right now. Our investments in Hartford around housing downtown are very important on a strategic basis, where we've already seen over 1,000 units of rental housing come on, and we want to see a total of 3,000 units of rental housing come on. That's in a state that didn't have a housing department before I became governor, by the way. Stamford, the same thing. As fast as they build rental housing, it is filling up. We have to learn and change our mindset about what housing is, what it takes to be attractive to young people, how we put communities together that are supportive of the transition between, well, listen, most of us in this room, looking at the color of hair and stuff, got married in our 20s. Young people aren't doing that anymore. So their transition is later in life from one type of living to another type of living. We haven't fully adapted to that even in our own state as psychology. So I think, number one, be attractive. Now, what does that mean to be attractive? Okay, it means you have to have a transportation system that moves people to and fro. A lot of these young people don't want to own a car. So what are we doing about that? We're investing in the New Haven to Hartford to Springfield commutation line. We're going to restore commutation on that line starting in January of 2018. That's going to be big for you all in your community. And as I was there on that bridge, pointing out the various housing development sites in and around that park, that TOD, that area that's now far safer from floods than it's ever been in the last 150 years. So I think that understanding the relationship of how people want to live their lives, what the demographics of the state are, and what our strengths are, and making ourselves more attractive as people move through that demographic change is very important. So those are some of the things. We've got to be safer. By the way, how safe are we? We're the safest we've been in our state in 50 years because our crime rate is at a 50-year low. In 2014, violent crime in Connecticut dropped 2.5 times the national average. This past year, in 2015, violent crime's down 7%. We'll understand, I think, sometime later next week when the FBI announces its data where that puts us nationally. It is remarkable what we're doing, but nobody notices. Some of that is also what it takes to be attractive to young people. Now, let me say one other thing. I talked about Stamford and I talked about New Haven. Norwalk, Connecticut is getting it. This is a place that wouldn't build apartment-style housing for a long period of time. Now they've built many, many, many units, and they become occupied as soon as the units are there. And who's occupying them? Some of them are like you and me, guys who may have had all our children grow up and move on, and so we move back to urban environments. But most of them are young people, relatively young. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Sure.
Yes, well, of course, we're in the middle of our new economic reality now, and the painful process of shifting.
Well, thank you for using my term. I appreciate it.
Quote unquote.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to hear is your vision for where we're going. We're in the middle of the pain. Where at the end, where do you see we are going and should be going, and how should that balance look in the new scenario?
I think that for planning purposes, listen, if Donald Trump gets elected president, and I know some of you love him, we're going to see a worldwide depression. So with that aside, because once the world loses faith in America, faith is lost. And if you do any reading of the international papers, nobody understands what the hell this election is about in our country. I mean, they're really scratching their head. So with that aside, assuming that Donald Trump doesn't become the next president of the United States, I think we should assume slow growth, not unlike that which we've experienced in the country. I think we should assume that working wages will rise a little bit faster than they have, as we can now see happen in 2015. We can see, I think, an uptick in the participation rate with respect to working. This is interesting. In the state of Connecticut, even though we created thousands of jobs, our quote-unquote unemployment rate went up because we've actually attracted people back to the job market. That's a good thing. So I think that there's so I think slow growth is the name of the game. When you have the central banks of the entire industrial world scratching their head on how they get to something above 2% GDP and something approaching 2% inflation, then you know we're probably in slow growth for a long period of time. The other thing I would predict is that our country will resolve some of its problems and that there will be some form of tax reform vis-a-vis international competition with respect to corporate taxes. I think that would be a good thing. I hope that that's tied to repatriation of foreign gained capital into the United States. I think it will be to some extent tied. That will be a good thing. I hope that's tied to additional investment in infrastructure. That would be a good thing. Big job creator. So I think that you know, I look at this stuff all the time. I review on a 4 or 5 times a day. What's our, you know, what are bonds doing? What are 10-year bonds doing? Yesterday they got as high as 1.72%, settled back down again. What are commodities doing? Copper's dirt cheap, as you probably know. And I think we're going to have a period of time where oil fluctuates, but is not going to gain the steam that it once did. And I think the fact that America is energy independent at this very moment, even though we may, for price purposes, import fuels, the reality is that the Americas, Mexico, Canada, and the United States are energy independent, is something that you cannot undervalue, should not undervalue. No.
One time.
No, I gave you the answer, whatever the question is.
Well, I can give you the answer. Yeah, a little bit of a statement is that I don't think we toot our horn enough in the state. You know, we a 130-person company got a $610 million government contract. Very little recognition of that, and I would think that the state would be tooting its horn about that.
I thought I was. I mean, I didn't use you as an example. I apologize, but I did get your flu shot. So.
Okay. So the other question I have is that, you know, we see these surveys where 45% of the people want to leave the state, and so I ask, is that what you're talking about, the perception, or are people just asking the wrong question? I don't really see that.
I think it's a little bit of everything. The question is if people say they want to leave the state of Connecticut, what does that mean? Do you think 40% of the people are going to leave the state of Connecticut? No. A couple of things demographically. Again, and I think that the failure to understand and study demographics is a gigantic failure. So we're the 7th oldest state in the nation. Don't be shocked that people who are approaching retirement want to move to a place where the winters are nicer.
I'm a Minnesota boy, so they're great.
Right. Well, you know, Canadians scratch their head about that as well. And yeah, I mean, now listen, if I want to go to Stanford for a morning meeting from Hartford, I have to plan 3 hours in a trip that would otherwise take me an hour and 20 minutes. So what do you think frustrates people in the morning in Fairfield County? Right? I mean, I could give you lots of examples of that kind of stuff. We need to address our long-term dissatisfaction with Connecticut on an ongoing basis and stop lying to ourselves and lying to the public. We need to make investments. And if we're doing anything in this administration, we're making those investments. And I think if we had a dependable transportation system, people wouldn't be as frustrated. If we had funded our long-term obligations, my administration does, by the way, but if we had done that for 20 years before, people wouldn't have the fear of the unfunded obligation that we have, right? I mean, these are strategic. My predecessors, John Rowland entered into a 20-year agreement with respect to benefits that started with $1 copay. And he thought it was a good idea to have all of that arranged well in advance. The problem is that in doing that, he entered into an agreement where he wouldn't have to fund those. So he locked in the cost and refused to fund. And every year the cost got bigger and bigger and bigger, particularly as people approach retirement. So I'll give you who's the governor who's fully funding the pension obligation of the state of Connecticut? I am. Never done before. Who's the governor who has the smallest workforce in the last 20 years? 30 years. You're right. My administration. What's the administration that has played a role in increasing graduation rates after years of decline? You're right. My administration. Which administration has overseen the largest drop in crime? You're right. My administration. Which administration has seen an decrease in recidivism? That is, fewer people going back to jail after they've been released. You're right. Our administration. Which administration is investing in and alongside of over 2,000 businesses in the last 6 years? You're right. It's our administration. Which administration has laid out a transportation policy that would require the expenditure of $100 billion over 30 years so that we'd have a transportation system that competes with Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey? You're right. It's our administration. Which administration found another way to pay for that by setting aside a half cent of the sales tax so that we could move forward with that program? You're right. It's our administration. Now, you all think I'm obnoxious for making you listen to all of that. But I feel better. Have a great day.
So apparently this, in fact, is Shameless Self-Promotion Month. And I agree we should do a whole lot more bragging in this community and in this state for what's going on here. I'd like to thank our friends from AT&T and Flublock, by Protein Sciences. TD Bank, thank you very much. Very pleased to have Alternative Therapy, a professional counseling service, and the Silver Series Sports Bar and Grill with us today. Our friends from Wallingford Hubcap, thank you folks, and the Cheshire Chamber of Commerce as well. Thank you for coming out. And I want to let you know we are working on some of the issues that were just talked about with our governor. Our chamber has a housing grant through the James H. Napier Foundation. We're trying to understand how to attract millennials and how to create the housing for the downsizers as well. And we also just this week, in conjunction with the City of Meriden ED office, submitted an Innovation Places grant to CT Next. You'll hear a little bit more about that in the future. So we are trying to understand these issues the governors have brought up, and we are on task to make it happen. So please spread that word as well. Folks, thank you all for coming out this morning. We hope to see you all very soon. Have a fabulous day at work.